The way she looked at me when she woke up.
I'm feeling so good today.
You gotta keep your eyes on the ball.
Hey everybody, welcome to Prairie Lakes. We're really glad that you are here with us, whether it's in person or online. And we're especially glad if you're here and you're coming back, like if you're returning and maybe last weekend was like your first weekend with us, or maybe your first weekend in a long time. You said yes to coming on Easter and maybe experience something a little bit different. Hopefully in a good way, and you're back. And so wherever you're at in this journey, we really, seriously, we're just glad that you're here. That being said, celebrate a few things with me, if you would, about last weekend. So Easter's obviously a big weekend around here at Prairie Lakes, and the thing that we're celebrating the most is 17 people stepping across the faith line. 17 people said yes to Jesus. So. That's awesome. That's the whole reason why we do this. We do it if there was one. We do it if there was 1,700. It doesn't matter. We're really, really just glad to be a part of what God's doing. I know a lot of you decided you gave just to give a portion of your Easter weekend to us too, some time. Thanks for serving on teams. Thanks for giving. Thanks for being a part of what God's doing, okay? All right. Hey, this weekend we're kicking off a new series that I'm kind of excited about. And I think it's a series that I'm excited about because I feel like I need it. And I think a lot of us do as well. But here's the series title. We're calling it Upside Down. Upside Down. Now, we're not just talking about like the physics of being upside down. We're not just going to show you different images of things being upside down for several weeks. That'd be super boring. Not like that. More talking about like when we're upside down in like our finances, you know, and we got more going out than coming in, or upside down in our calories. You know, more going down our gullets than we're spending on exercise. Things aren't going in the right direction. Or maybe, you know, upside down like when you're studying hard, but like you're not seeing the grades move in the right direction. Or you're working 50 and 60 hours a week, but you're still behind. It's that kind of upside down that we're talking about, okay? Now, that might feel like a super depressing series. You know, like, hey everybody, let's spend a few weeks talking about how we spend too much and eat too much. How about that, you know? I promise you that's not what we're doing, okay? We're not doing that. But here's the deal. Here's the deal. When it comes to feeling upside down, when it comes to that feeling, that experience, it's pretty discouraging, but it's pretty common. All of us, I think, are kind of in that boat, maybe currently or at one time or another. Pretty discouraging, but pretty common. We have a tendency to hide it or hide from it even. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but I think one of them is because there's not an easy fix. We hide it or we hide from it because, man, it just doesn't feel like there's a there's a way through or a way out, but there always is. There's always a way through. There's always a way out. And that's why we're doing this series, and that's what I'm excited about, okay? So here's the topic for this weekend as we kick off this series of being upside down. Here's how you, me, a lot of us are probably upside down. We're upside down in this area of our lives. We over consume. We over consume. It's one way a lot of us are upside down. Okay, so let's just get some of the easy targets out of the way, right? Here's one easy target. Okay, all right. Let's talk about it. Easter was just last weekend. I'm betting a lot of you, like me, you went to church and then you went somewhere after church that involved ham. And it was awesome. And maybe it also involves some scalloped or baked or mashed or cheesy potatoes. And maybe all four of those because the risen Jesus loves variety. Or maybe your Easter plate also had something that was called a salad. But by the Midwestern definition of that term, you know, like how we talk about salads, we talk about it's got a lot of whipped cream or Oreos or Jell-O. It's got some fruit, and that's why we call it a salad, but you know. So obviously, okay, the first place that a lot of us overconsume when it comes to our lives is this area of food. It's caloric intake. It's pretty easy target. Let me say this though, okay? This is an especially American and even an especially Iowan problem, this over-consuming in this area. Let me just give you some stats quickly here, okay? Globally, like 13% of adults are obese. In the US, it's 41%, almost 3 times the amount of the global average. And then Iowa's trucking in at the 11th most, right? Shocker that those of us in the Midwest would, maybe comfort ourselves in the winter and reward ourselves for surviving the summer with some extra calories. Now, fear not, okay? This is not going to be some sort of, let's just pray the fat away kind of message, okay? It's not what we're doing. But what I want you to do here is this, okay? Open up a mental file folder just in your mind and file some of these over-consuming things away. First one's calories, all right? Let's get to another one. Let's talk about over-consuming maybe in the area of money, finances. Here's some more stats for you, okay? 68% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. It's a reality for a lot of us, paycheck to paycheck, which is very stressful, okay? But we just got a lot going out. The average American holds $102,000 in consumer debt. Millennials, 26 through 41, ages 26, they increased their credit card balance in 22 by 23%. The average balance is $5,600 if you're in that age group. Generation Z was a little bit worse. They increased theirs by 25%. They're not making as much money, but they're still holding around $3,000 of credit card debt. And then 42% of Americans have less than $1,000 in their savings. We're spending quite a bit. We're holding a lot of debt balances. A lot's going out, probably because we might be over-consuming in that area and not as much as coming in or being saved up, okay? Now, those numbers might be validating for you because you're not as upside down as some of those numbers. And in fact, Iowa does actually pretty good. We're better than average in this category. But my guess is this. My guess is at least one or two of these describe some of us. And $6 eggs didn't help either, right? But of all the stats I could throw your way to help you get your mind around this overconsumption thing, here's one that I think is the most compelling. Around 70% of our gross domestic product, our economy essentially, what we're producing, 70% of it relies upon consumer spending, okay? I'm not an economist, I'm not pretending to be, but from my vantage point, this does explain a couple things. It explains why we panic when people slow down their spending. Like on houses, cars, phones, food, whatever. Like we panic when consumers slow down. They don't buy as much. I mean, people aren't going to Applebee's just like they used to. Oh, sound the panic button. Why? Because most of our lives now rest on people spending, consuming something, everything. And if they backed off this month, then what's next month going to be like? And what's the next month going to be like? And we're just going to, so 70%. Now, here's what this means. We have built a culture. Our culture is built on consuming. That's just the data, the facts of that. More and more of our economy, more and more of our feelings of well-being, of safety and security, they rest on people, us included, spending, consuming, to the point where a lot of economists currently are going, I don't get it. I don't get it. Inflation continues to run high. Interest rates continue to go up. Lots of us are feeling the squeeze at home, and yet a lot of us continue not only to spend, but spend at higher levels. So just crazy. We consume like our lives depend on it because we kind of created a system in which they kind of do. And I'm saying that tongue in cheek, but you get what I'm saying, right? So we don't just overconsume, we don't just consume, we overconsume, a lot of us. And so listen, if you're upside down in any of these areas, food, spending, whatever, it's no wonder. It's no wonder. Because just about everything in our world, and especially our part of the world, pulls on us, invites us, compels us, pushes us to do exactly that. And before we move away from this, okay, I'd be remiss if I didn't at least add one more area of our lives in which we are very likely to be over-consuming. And let's talk technology. Let's talk screen time, okay? Here's some stats, and actually we've shared these before, but here's some stats. Average screen time consumption. Internet usage on average, we're consuming 48 hours a week of our lives on the internet, which if you play that out over the average lifespan, 20 years. 20 years of our lives on the internet. TV is 24 hours a week, 10 years of your life. Social media, 17, 7 years of your life. News, 14, 5 years of your life. And if you're on TikTok, I know that's kind of loaded these days, isn't it? But if you are, you're spending around 95 minutes of your day on it, scrolling, okay? Crazy, right? Now remember what we said, okay? When it comes to being upside down, we have a tendency to either hide it or hide from it. And so all of these stats, you may look at that and go like, nope, I mean, that's crazy, that's not me, that feels like an exaggeration, you know? And if that's you, I want to remind you, because we shared these with you before. We shared these with you at the beginning of 2022, Pastor Cody and myself, when we talked about this series called Attention War. And if you were there that weekend, you're also going to recall that we showed you that your phone tracks your usage. And some of you, that was news to you. And it tracks how much you use your phone and how you use it, what apps, so on and so forth. And here's what I remember. I remember we got done that weekend delivering the message. And I remember seeing pockets of people in the worship center all huddled around their phones going, you know, what's yours look like? And ooh, you know, and then like, you know, you just kind of realize, you know, how much you're using it, because you don't feel like you are, but it turns out the data says, the stats say, yep, you probably are, okay? So we overconsume. We're probably upside down there, maybe not in every single one of those areas, but probably at least one. Maybe it's food, spending, screen time, whatever. We all got something, right? We all got something. Guilty. Me too. Guilty as charged. Now, here's the thing. This over-consuming thing that we got going on, it's not just a 2023 problem, okay? It didn't start with the consumer economy. It wasn't invented by the TV networks or big tech, you know. The problem of over-consuming actually originates inside of us. And this has really been the case for some time. The problem isn't out in the world. The problem is us. I mean, something in us is drawn to over-consuming. And that's been true for a long time now. I just want to show you a story, okay? 1 Kings 3 is where we're going to be. 1 Kings is a little bit closer to the front of the Old Testament. So if you have an actual book of the Bible, or Bible book, I should say, you should go to the front. We're going to have the verses on the screen as well. But we're going to look at the story of Solomon and starting in 1 Kings 3 and a couple of other chapters. And Solomon is the he's the third king of the nation of Israel. And by far, he ends up being the most wealthy. But he didn't really start that way. And so I want to pick up the story in 1 Kings 3, and we're looking at verse 4. Here's the story of Solomon. The king, Solomon, he went to Gibeon to offer sacrifices, for that was the most important high place. And Solomon offered 1,000 burnt offerings on that altar. And at Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon during the night in a dream. He said, "Ask for whatever you want me to give you." Okay, so there's the part of the story that we're kind of helicoptering down into. Now, if you've been in church a while, and maybe you've been in the Bible for a while too, if that's you, nothing about these verses, trips you up, right? But if that's not you, what's a high place? And why 1,000 burnt offerings? That seems like a lot of dead animals. And I'm expected to believe that the God of the universe appeared to some dude in a dream and 3,000 years ago, Yeah, I get it. Like that, yes, that if I were you, that would sound weird to me too. And for what it's worth, I'm not saying that you have to believe that or know for sure if God still does that today or whatever, but you do need to know that the author of the text believes that this happened, and I do too. But I'm just going to invite you, all of us, let's just imagine this for a second. Imagine ourselves in this story. Imagine that God, the God of the universe, came to you given all that you're managing and all that you're leading and all that you're hoping for. And this God of the universe says, "I'm your genie in a bottle. I'm giving you one wish. Go." And you cannot wish for infinite wishes. Okay? No, you can't do that. Okay? But what would you say? What would you say? How would you respond? What would you ask for if you knew and believed that it was the God of the universe and he was going to make good in his word? What would you do? Okay? Here's what Solomon did, verse 6. Solomon answered, "You've shown great kindness to your servant, my father David, because he was faithful to you and righteous and upright in heart. And you've continued this great kindness to him, and you've given him a son to sit on his throne. To this very day, David was his father, the king before him." Okay? And he continues, "Now, Lord, my God, you've made your servant king in place of my father David. But I'm only a little child and do not know how to carry out my duties. Your servant is here among the people you've chosen, a great people too numerous to count or number." And so then here's what he asks for. "So, give your servant a discerning heart." Why? To govern your people and to distinguish between right and wrong, for who's able to govern this great people of yours? Of all the things in the world that Solomon could have asked for, all the things, he asks for wisdom. Help me to do the thing that you've called me to do, God, because I don't think I got it in me. In fact, I know I don't. Take a look at God's response, okay? The Lord was pleased that Solomon had asked for this, so God said to him, "Since you've asked for this, and not for long life or wealth for yourself, nor have asked for the death of your enemies, but instead for discernment and administering justice, I'll do what you have asked. I will give you a wise and discerning heart, so that there will never have to be anyone like you, nor will there ever be, so that there will never have been anyone like you, nor there will be. I'm going to make you unique. Moreover, I'll give you what you've not asked for, both wealth and honor, so that in your lifetime you'll have no equal among kings." Like bonus wish granted. It's a pretty great deal. And what an amazing start for like a young man, and especially a guy who's following David, who was the most famous and beloved of all these kings, and just that's exactly where he began, with this humility and God, I need you, here's what I need. That's how Solomon starts out. He passes the test, so to speak. And he's not in it for himself. And God loves this, okay? And so God's given him this task. And his first one that God entrusts to him is actually building a temple. like a permanent place of worship for God to dwell with his people. They haven't ever done that before. It had been a tabernacle, it had been a big tent until that point. And if you read through 1 Kings, you're going to see that there was very specific guidelines for how God wanted this built. And it ended up being like a wonder of the world level, beautiful by the time it was done. In fact, here's how 1 Kings described it. In the 11th year, in the month of Bol, I don't know. In the 8th month, the temple was finished in all its details, according to its specifications. And Solomon spent 7 years building it. 7 years, right? Great biblical number. It's that number of perfection or completion. Exactly how God had said to build it, okay? And then look what literally the next verse says. It took Solomon 13 years to build what? His house. 7 years for God's, 13 years for his. Awkward, right? It's a pretty nice house, God, but wait till you see mine. Wait till you see what I'm building. And this really is it's like foreshadowing in Solomon's story, this wealth that God had blessed Solomon with because he wasn't chasing after it. This wealth, well, it becomes something he starts to chase after. And so in chapter 10, we're told that Solomon received 25 tons of gold. 25 tons of gold annually. And what's he do with that? He makes them into 500 gold shields. And then we're told he makes himself a throne out of ivory, and he overlays that throne with gold. And then he makes himself goblets of gold. It says he accumulated 1,400 chariots and 12,000 horses. You can just see this guy, he's got an appetite to accumulate and consume and eventually, obviously, overconsume. And as he chases after all this stuff, his story, this overconsumption of his, gets pretty dark. And 1 Kings 11, 1 through 4, here's what it says. King Solomon loved many foreign women besides Pharaoh's daughter, Moabites and Ammonites and Edomites and Sidonians and the Hittites, and they were from nations about which the Lord had told the Israelites, don't intermarry with them because they'll surely turn your hearts after their own gods. But Solomon held fast to them in love. 700 wives, 300 concubines. I'm not even going to tell you what that is. And they led him astray. And so Solomon grew old. His wives turned his heart after other gods, and his heart was not fully devoted to the Lord his God as the heart of David, his father, had been. In fact, as the story goes on, Solomon, this guy who starts out humbly just asking for wisdom, he becomes the king who not only follows after foreign gods, but what that meant back then, there was two specifically. One required worship through illicit sex, and the other required worship through child sacrifice. And the text says he did both. And it's a painful truth in Solomon's story. And granted, it's an extreme example for sure. But the truth underneath that extreme example is also true for any of us who are allowing our appetites and overconsumption to rule our lives and shape the trajectory of our lives. And that is this. Whenever we're giving into our desire to overconsume, whenever we're doing that, wherever we're doing that in our lives, okay? Wherever you and I are overconsuming, what we're really doing is replacing something over God and what He desires for us. That's what we're actually doing. Now, this is something I believe, and I also recognize this. This is something that there's a lot in our culture that says, no, come on. Come on. I mean, if every time you overconsume, you're doing something that God doesn't like, or wherever you're chasing after more, spending more than you earn, or on your phone way too much, or whatever you might be upside down with, right? Is it really fair to say, or is it really fair to frame all that up as a sin, right? Like I'm doing something against God. Is that really okay? Here's what I think. I think a lot of us, we already have so much built up shame and insecurity about these areas of our lives, these areas of overconsumption, that the idea of adding God's disapproval of them, it's like something that just makes us want to drown our sorrows in a sleeve of Oreos, right? Ironically, okay? So I'm not trying to like add to your shame, okay? And I don't think God is trying to do that either. That's not what I'm trying to do even with this statement. But I do want to invite you to consider the true nature of our overconsumption, and not only in what it's doing to our lives, but what it's doing to our hearts. Because here's the truth, okay? Whenever we place something over God in our lives, which is what overconsumption does, whenever we do that, we're really putting ourselves in some pretty significant danger. I mean, really. For Solomon, he chased after gold and wealth and fame and sex and all of it, and it ended up costing him everything and a bunch of other people as well. You might not think your poor choices in diet or finances or screen time or whatever are going to cost you nearly as much, but you don't know. You might be wrong about that. And really, I don't think that any of us, in our heart of hearts, I don't think that any of us wants that for ourselves. I don't think we really ultimately at the deepest level want to be people who overconsume. I just don't think we do. I know we've got these compulsions, this desire to overconsume, but I don't think we ultimately want to be ruled by them. And I know for sure that God doesn't want that for any of us either, okay? So remember where we started. Here's what we said. We said when it comes to feeling upside down, it's pretty discouraging, pretty common. We have a tendency to hide it or hide from it. There's no easy fix, but there's always a way through. And there's always a way out. There is. Okay? And I want to just camp on that last line there before we walk out of this room today. Because what's the way out and what's the way through? How do we start moving this over-consuming deal that we got going? How do we start moving that in a different direction, the opposite direction? So we're not upside down, so we're right side up on some of this. I just want to suggest a few things, okay? Ways out of our over-consuming, or ways through it, if you will. Number one is this. Confront the brutal facts. Start tracking, okay? Start tracking. Now this principle is certainly not something I came up with. Sounds way smart. It came out of a book called Good to Great. It was written by a guy named Jim Collins. And a lot of us, I'm sure, have read it. If you haven't, you need to. But it's one of his principles about great leaders and great organizations. They confront the brutal facts. Now, in his book, if you read it, he's careful to clarify, you also can't do so and then lose faith or give up hope. But he kind of clarifies, some of us cling to faith or hope as an excuse not to confront the brutal facts about our reality. A lot of times we'll just wave faith or positivity or God's got it, or I know I'm not doing great, but I'll be fine, And what he's going to encourage us to do, and I think God does as well, is just take some stock of what is actually going on, what actually has got your heart, why you're actually, and what you're actually doing. I think it's true that for these areas of our lives that we're upside down in, especially over consuming, I think it's true that we have a tendency to hide it or to hide from it. We just do. I do, for sure, okay? The last thing that a lot of us want to do is confront it. And I get that. And I'll just be vulnerable with you here, okay? The area of my life that I probably have struggled the most with this is, and I've been up and down in this, is calories for me. It's my weight, it is. It's my food choices, it's my eating, it is, absolutely. Shocker, right? Can't get up on the weekend without people knowing. But listen to me, okay? Because the way out of that, whether it's that or something else, the way out of that is like confronting the brutal facts. For me, it's getting on the scale every day, which sucks. I'm sorry, stinks. Ooh. No, it sucks. It does, but that's the way out, just seeing it. And then tracking what I eat every day. I do that. I've been doing that now I'm doing that periodically. And then about 3 months, I think I'm 135 meals in, okay? I'm getting some regular exercise, and I like that. Because you know what? At the bottom of me, the deepest part of me, I do not want to be ruled by it. Neither do you. But you have to start by kind of going, okay, what am I actually doing here? Stop hiding it. Stop hiding from it, okay? Start tracking how what you're doing is making you upside down. If it's finances, you got to start budgeting. If it's screen time, you actually got to start tracking that and putting some stuff in place. Confront the brutal facts, number one. Number two is this. Practice telling yourself, that's enough. That's enough. It's a novel idea. I know. But this is practice. This requires practice because we don't do this. Not instinctively, I don't think. In a world of convenience, making consuming something, whatever it is, easier. We want to make that easier. We want to make it quicker. We want to make it more seamless. You want this, just click a button, you know. What if, in that world, you started to simply try and tell yourself, hey, that's enough. That's enough. It doesn't even have to be in your upside down over consuming area, okay? You can try it in any area of your life, right? Hey, I've been scrolling for a while now, and I got this little advertisement about this cool thing on Amazon. That's enough. That's enough. Click that thing off. The bag says that 8 chips is 1 serving, and I've never actually counted out what 8 chips looks like on a plate, but okay, there's 8. That's enough. I've got this streaming service, but they've bundled this one now with that kind of thing, and if I sign up for it, I get this free cool tote bag. It's always the tote bag, right? But hey, maybe 1 streaming service is enough, right? I mean, take a look at this verse from Proverbs, okay? 25:16. I love this. If you find honey, eat just enough. Too much of it and you'll vomit. Vomiting honey is a horrible image, right? There's a difference between consuming and over-consuming. There's a difference. Define enough and start just practicing telling yourself, hey, that's enough, okay? All right, last one, number 3. Try this. Try spending on others first before you spend on you. Sometimes the root of our overconsumption is misplaced priorities. And by that, here's what I mean. We spend on me first. We spend on us first. I spend on me first, things that I need, then the things that I want, then the things that I don't need but kind of want, you know. And then there's that great deal that came up for the kids who need that, and it's been a long time, so we took a real vacation, and the cost of everything has gone up, and so not a lot left over. What if you decided to give things that weren't out of the leftover? What if that was first? Whatever it was, however much, okay? What if before you spent on anything, consumed anything, you set something aside to bless others? Maybe it's a charity that is especially meaningful to you. Maybe it's church. Maybe it's time that you gave to our church or gave a little bit more to our church. Maybe it's a secret fund that you just set aside, and whenever a need comes up, you can maybe make an impact in that person's life or that need. Well, it doesn't matter, okay? Because here's the principle, again from Proverbs. Honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops. Then your barns are going to be filled to overflowing, your vats will brim over with new wine. First fruits is an agricultural term. Back then it meant, hey, when you harvest your crops, instead of first storing it or first selling it, first give some away. And it's not to give so you can get kind of magical thing, but it's a principle. Start with generosity first and you'll experience a pretty generous life. Over-consuming, okay? Those are the ways out. Those are the ways through. Try some of those this week. I hope that this series piqued your interest a little bit. I hope it kind of landed. We're going to be journeying with it over the next few weeks before we continue in the service. Let me pray for us, okay? Father, I know this is an area that all of us, we've got a little bit of guilt, a little bit of shame, A little bit of insecurity probably built up. Some of us are pretty discouraged. Some of us are hiding. Some of us are hiding from it. God, would you reach down wherever we're at and just help us take a few steps outside of that and through that. And just help us as we do. God, I pray all this in your Son, Jesus' name. Amen.